So today we're going to be talking about what does family mean to you. Really excited to have this conversation with you. Please continue. Hi, Veronica from that MS. Which one is that?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. I thought so.
That's what I think. But it could be Missouri. What is Missouri?
I know. That's what I was thinking. Help us out, Veronica. Yes,
Oh,
Mississippi.
MO is Missouri. But Anna, where are you from again? I guess Texas or New Mexico, but I have that part of the country in my mind for you.
So next slide. Ways to engage. When you're ready to speak, please raise your hand and we will ask you to unmute yourself and to share your screen. Feel free to type your comments during the webinar to just make sure it's going to everyone. And please be patient with us sometimes when there's a lot of people typing at the same time in the chat. It kind of gets ahead of us, so we ask for your patience. Next slide, please. And I think, so in order to make sure this is a great experience and that it's respectful and we have this mutual sharing and learning going on, we have these agreements. We want to speak from our own experience. So we want to use I statements. We use the golden rule. We're going to treat people the way we want to be treated. We ask that you bring your full presence, no multitasking. But of course, if you need a minute, take a minute. If you agree to these agreements, please type I agree in the chat. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Genevieve.
Jennifer agrees too.
Hi, Jennifer.
Awesome.
Hola. And
this is my slide. We're in the middle of our annual campaign, Be Strong Families. We have an annual, this is our second year only. And our annual campaign this year is raising money for programming work we want to do on resources for LGBTQ plus kids and families. I think we've become, a lot of our partners have asked us to do a deck, a cafe deck. Those of you who know us as the cafe people, we do cafe conversations. And one issue that's really weighing on people's hearts and heads is that there are kids who are gender nonconforming or have a sexual orientation other than heterosexual, and they're on these journeys, and their parents who are trying to help them are ending up rejecting them or hurting them because they don't understand. They're trying to keep them on the straight and narrow, but it ends up doing damage and causing a lot of pain and suffering. So one of the decks we're doing is for parents who want to talk about their kids' journeys with identifying as part of the LGBTQ community. And the other deck we want to do is because a lot of our partners have said that they want to increase their resources for LGBTQ plus parents. And because a lot of times their issues aren't as integrated into mainstream family services as they could be. So we are talking about doing those two things, as well as increasing or enhancing our own journey towards being welcoming and inclusive of everybody. So if you agree with this focus and or if you just want to show your love for families and for us, please consider going to our website and making a small donation. Doesn't have to be huge. Huge is great. Doesn't have to be huge. Just makes us feel like you're with us. So thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, Andrew. So let's get started with this conversation. How has family changed for you over time? How has family changed for you over time?
We have a lot of like really kind of deep questions for today's webinar, really.
I know.
You know, because when I think of how family has changed for me over time, it also is like how I've changed over time. So this is like what Jennifer's saying, like becoming a parent. You know, like it's different to be a child in a family and then to be a parent of the family and then to be a grandparent. And those different roles. And also over time for me, I think I've also the notion of family has expanded. Like my family is not just my biological family. It's not just who I was born with. For a long time, I was really very interested in creating my soul circle, and I have people that are like sisters to me who are not biologically related or adopted. I also have been an adoptive parent, so I've connected to cultures and to people, very far from where I started. And my family expanded. And in some ways, I lost a little bit of touch with my family of origin for a number of years. And the season I'm in now is really one, and COVID really brought this about, is reconnecting with my original family of origin and working on building those relationships and, within what normal people would consider their family. So that's how it's changed for me. How about you, Alex?
Well, Sheila says a lot of my family is now friends. And I think that's one of the things for me. I have very, very close friends who I consider family. Um, and I think that's too a little bit of just that hip hop culture. There's a slang about hey fam, and you really use that for people that you consider to be, your family, just as close to you as your blood family. Also, my family has changed over time, unfortunately, because of people transitioning. Starting with my brother who passed probably 3.5 years ago now, and then my mom last December. So it's changed the dynamics of what my nuclear family was. So I was divorced, and so it was just myself and my twin daughters. And then, of course, my parents, they were there, extended family, my brothers. But right now, my nuclear family consists of my father and the twins, and then I was recently married. So that dynamic has changed, and I have from that marriage my two other children. So yeah, it's expanded, it's grown, and then there's been the whole journey of resilience of dealing with, those close family members, and we're a very tight knit family. So Andrew says the relationships ebb and flow. There are family members that I'm much closer to now compared to when we were growing up together, and I've connected with the larger extended family in a way that I never expected. At the same time, I have family members I was very close to growing up, and over time, that has changed. Definitely. Feel free to type in the chat, or if you want to like raise your hand and talk to us and join the conversation. Jennifer says, yes, lots of changes when family members pass on, big transitions.
Yeah, and we don't have it's not really a question. I don't know if this is part of the question or not, but I've been thinking about that because more and more, I guess my first relative that was close to me, my grandmother passed in 1996. And I remember that because it was the first one. I remember where I was. I remember that I felt like I had been punched in the stomach, like I actually had a physical response to the grief. It was like, and I was supposed to be doing a conference, and I didn't. I mean, I checked out at that point. I couldn't. Um, but now there's so many people that I remember from my youth that are not here anymore, because that's what happens naturally as you get older. So I don't have any grandparents left, they've all passed on, and my father just passed on last year. And it's just weird. I'm finding myself with a lot of memories of when I was a child, and remembering, like spending time with people who are just not around anymore. And it's just weird. I don't know. Is that?
Yeah. So Jessica said, As I grew up, I began to form closer bonds to certain family members compared to others due to our views.
Yeah, I'm working on that one too, Jessica. There was huge, and actually we're gonna talk about that later. Be Strong Families had a whole last year, there were a lot of us that were struggling because our families were kind of being torn apart by different views and different political views, and everybody feels passionate, and it feels like a life or death situation, and really connected to values and ethics and who you are, and so, but we were also thinking like, but I love these people. Like, this is my brother, and if I can't figure out how to love my brother and connect with my brother, you know, then that's kind of sad. So, teaser alert, we have we have a way to do some of that later in the presentation.
Sheila says, we have a very close relationship where I work, and we call each other my work family. Lovely. Yeah, definitely family, the different views. I think I resonated with what Jessica said about form closer bonds, and in reference to my extended family. There were certain uncles who were like my favorite uncle when I was little, but then as I grew up for different reasons, it became another uncle. So I've had that experience. So of course I love them all, but it just changed as I grew up. Sylvia says, I feel like my family has changed over the years. I'm closer to one of my sister's family and not as close to my brother's family. I guess it has to do with our priorities and our family values. Definitely. I think being recently married and marrying a man who's from a different culture. So now my mother-in-law, who's actually very similar to my mother, it's just very interesting. Even though we're from totally different cultures, she's kind of like stepped in to be my bonus mom, and we've gotten to be very close. So I'm kind of glad of that, because it's not, of course, nothing will ever um, fill that hole from the loss of a parent, but having someone who is in that position definitely helps with the grieving process. So next, speaking of that, next question, I think that's a great segue to how sorry, how have you related to your ancestors over your lifetime? How have you related to your ancestors over your lifetime?
So I'll start and say that when I was a little kid, or when I was growing up, I didn't think much about my ancestors, and I didn't know much about my ancestors. I didn't. It was really my grandmother and my great grandmother didn't talk about the people that came before them very much at all. I learned, but as those people passed, as I learned more about them, and also as I became socially and politically conscious and historical, I did not like who I was from. I think it was a lot of white people, who want to be allies and believe strongly in social justice. As my politics was coming up, I was like, could not reconcile. I didn't want my ancestors to be my ancestors. I didn't want to be from this lineage or this people. And I tended to focus on the negative, about who they were and who they were structurally in society, rather than as individuals. And I guess as spiritually developing, and just as the way life has gone on, I had an epiphany. It also kind of distanced me from my parents, also in terms of their values and what they're not. I mean, and they're good people, but in just, I did not feel like we were like-minded at all. And I'm happy to say, I guess I was at my dad's memorial service last week, or 2 weeks. Was it 2 weeks ago or last week?
2 weeks.
Yeah, and I realized when I was there how much I am how much my ancestors are in me. You know, like I have a bell from Tibet that was my grandfather's mother went to Tibet. She was a single parent. Her husband died. She was a widow when he was 45, and she was a single parent. And she went around the world. And I'm thinking, like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, she was a world traveler in like the 1880s, something like that. And then looking at my grandmother on my father's side, who is an artist and who was a very spiritual person, and I'm thinking, like, I have that of her, so I guess I'm now relating a little differently. I've made an effort in the last couple of years in terms of, an altar in my home and like communicating with them, or at least, imaginatively from my heart, making connections and not being judgmental. Because I came to a realization, this is a little bit deep, but I came to a realization that family's not necessarily only a choice, it's kind of an imperative. And if you distance yourself, it's kind of like the gender conversation. If you distance yourself from your family, that you're distancing yourself from yourself. Or that's what, for me, when I distance myself from my family, it's actually an act of almost violence to myself. So the question is, how can I love my shadow? Psychologically, how can I embrace the parts of me that I don't like as much as other parts? And how can I embrace my ancestors that I don't relate to as much as others? I know that's a long, I don't know if anybody else thinks like that, but.
No, I think that was a great answer. It made me think about, again, that, science is catching up to what our ancient cultural and spiritual practices and paradigms, et cetera. And so what I thought about, again, was just, epigenetics and DNA. And so the piece that you said about, they are me, I am them, even down to your aunt. Um, so like for me, when I was younger, my family's my father particularly is very much about legacy. So I knew a lot of stories about my dad's family and some of my mom's family and like my grandfather's aunts and uncles and et cetera. And it's interesting because there's a pattern of like the same types of occupations, right? So they're either ministers, they're either college educators, creatives, or entrepreneurs. And it kind of expands like that, even from the first cousins, second cousins, et cetera, on my father's side. And so, and then I have an aunt who passed away a little bit for my brother, who we look so much alike that it's scary. Like it would be like pictures in my grandparents' house that I thought was me, but in my little mind, I was like, but I don't remember taking that picture because of how much, I mean, I probably look more like her than my mom. And so just relating that back to like genetics, not just the physical genetics, but also the characteristics, the behaviors, the spirituality. And so as I've grown, I knew about legacy, but on my own journey of learning about who I am as an African in America, learning about African traditional spiritual systems and cultures, the concept of ancestors and ancestor reverence has taken more of an important role in my life. And especially if I had, of course, like my brother and my mom passed. And so honoring them is a part of my spiritual practice and has actually helped me deal with my grief. And Jessica has a comment. Thank you, Jessica. Jessica said, I was also curious about my ancestors. However, my family can only remember so much. I can only research about them online or through books. My family lineage and are half natives from Mexico and the other from another country. They aren't sure exactly where they came from, though, which is why I'm so curious and I wanted to know. I need DNA testing. Yes, I actually did the one level of DNA testing. Actually, Katthe I don't even know if she remembers, but she's the one who gave me, she gifted me a 23andMe. And it was really good because it gave me my paternal and maternal and paternal side, but it just gave the countries. So there's one that I want to do too, Jessica, that specifically like narrows down what particular nation tribe I'm from. But it was super broad, but it was still interesting to see the genetic makeup. And now, of course, on those 23andMe's, I don't participate in all of it, but they can get down to the proclivity of you know, what health or like why your big toe is bigger than your little toe. I mean, it's just so interesting, all of the things that come up with genetics. And this is still just, an emerging field. And I think there's going to be more, more to connect it back to where I started. I think there's going to be more things, particularly in epigenetics, that shows how just much our ancestors and DNA and the blood continues to run through and affects us, not just physically, but mentally, psychologically, and spiritually.
Mm. Yeah. Who else wants to talk with us? I know
Yes.
we're fascinating, but who wants to talk? Raise your hand.
Oh, Sylvia says, as I became aware of the values of my ancestors, I've decided to follow many of their values in terms of family and the way they raised my mother. I'm so proud of the values of my parents and that my parents and grandparents instilled in me. In my culture, we continue to respect everyone, especially our elderly, and always speak to them with that respect and be willing to assist them in many ways.
And Rochelle
Definitely.
says, I too am curious about my family heritage and lineage. My intent is to complete a DNA to find out all the information that will reveal my family history.
Yeah, we are. It's so exciting, and it's changing. I noticed they update it as well.
Yeah,
Like
I think what Sylvia says is deep. Also, this whole respect everyone and especially our elderly. And I've been thinking more and more about that, like just in terms of as my mother gets older, and I'm because hearing her talk about how do I say this? It's kind of like because the society doesn't necessarily value old people, older people, like she feels like she's going to be a burden. She's very focused on not being a burden to us as she gets older, and about how when almost like when she loses her ability to take care of herself physically, that there's no, that she's her worth is and I keep saying to her, but mom, like you have so much wisdom, like you contributed, you gave so much over the course of your lifetime. It would be an honor to take care of you. Like it's just, it's you, there's seasons of giving and then there's seasons of taking. And you gotta let us gotta let us give to you. It's not all, but I think, and so I when I think about where that come from, I think it is really a bad thing in mainstream society that we don't have more reverence for elders and don't have more. I guess as I'm emerging into being an elder, I'm like, it's just very annoying. You've been on the planet for a long time, you have a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and then these young people, who I was one of them, think that they know everything and think that your information is outdated. So
Yeah, and I think if that it's people can come to their realization, but when it's like a part of the culture that you grow up in, it's like even when you're young, it's like a given. It's like a given. And Andrew says, I think about whatever I find about my ancestors, it's always just small, brief glimpse of their entire lives. I can pull a lot from photos I've seen of my great grandparents, but it's humbling to think about how little I will ever truly know about who they were as people and their experiences. I find that comforting. I find that a comforting idea at the same time.
yes, especially when nobody that knew them is around anymore. Like that's what I'm finding. Like when my Aunt Shirley, when my dad's memorial service, my Aunt Shirley was my dad's sister. I started, so I set the tone of like going pretty deep. But my Aunt Shirley told all these stories about growing up with him, and how he was as a brother to her when she was 5 and he was 10, and she told a story which I just absolutely love, and I'm going to tell it because it's an example of the kind of thing that Andrew's talking about, where things just get lost in the ethers. Nobody would know this, but they had a family dog, and my Aunt Shirley, when she was a little girl, really loved the family dog a lot, and the family dog evidently got distemper and had to be put down, and she didn't know that, and they told her that the dog had gone to live on a farm, and my father wrote they started getting letters from the farmer. That my father ended up writing letters to the family from the farmer saying that the dog was doing really well and was really happy and was enjoying chasing the chickens. And then there was a little paw print on the letters. And that he did that for a period of months or years until she was old enough to understand that the dog was gone. But it's a story about my father as a young man and the compassion that he had, and says a lot about who he was. But that kind of story, like if she weren't around, no one would know. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like the whole thing about how do we preserve the stories. It's like what you were saying about Alex, about your dad and legacy, is that it's those, and we had a webinar about this at the very beginning of COVID. Denise Boston did this about family stories and how important they are. Just the little bits, like the little stories, not the huge big picture. Oh, he was this and that, and he got this award or whatever. But just like the memories and how important that is in the fabric of family.
Definitely, and it's not like we don't have this technology. That's one of my greatest regrets with my mom, because in my mind, she was going to be fine and going to bounce back from the cancer. So in like hindsight, I was like, oh my God, I wish I had just had more recordings of interviewing her and telling stories and etc. Even though I have a lot of the stories in my memory and my dad tells a lot of the stories, but being more intentional, because I would like to be able to leave that for my grandparents, for my children and grandchildren, about that. And so Veronica said, I found many similarities in my interests in arts, values, and beliefs, creativity, and some similarities in physical features, similar to what you shared, Alexandra. Nice. Thank you, everyone. Next slide. What is important about family to you? What is important about family to you? We have one more comment from Rochelle. A cousin on my paternal side of the family has encouraged us to connect with one another once a month on Zoom call, and we are all able to tell stories and share photos of individual families from all over the country. Lovely. And I guess you all are recording it. That's a great idea. My husband comes from a big family, so his nuclear family and they're spread out. Some are in Nigeria, some are in the UK, here, and they have like this big family similarly. Nuclear family, then a big family recorder. And I really love that idea as a way to connect. And I think this is something they were doing even pre-COVID, just because of the distance between the relatives, of being able to keep up with everyone and know what's going on. I think it's important. For me, what's important about family is the sense of home, right? Not the house, not the place, but the sense of home. There's a certain level of relaxation around family, whether that's, blood or spiritual family, that you just can't get sometimes out in the world, being able to just totally relax into your authentic self, speak unedited, not in a way that you're editing. And then I think the other thing that's important for me about family, my mother used to say, your family is all you have beyond anything else. So your family is all that you really have. And in the end, that becomes what's most important, is making memories with your family. So she would prioritize, what's, like, oh, we're gonna go somewhere, and like, oh, we can't go here because of this thing or that thing or this money or that money. And it'd be like, listen, it's about making memories while you can. So I think the important thing for me is making memories with my family, and particularly with my daughters. So when they look back, over in their childhood, it's like, oh my goodness, like the good outweighs the bad. And then Rochelle said the thing most important to me is keeping the traditions of our family intact. It helps to keep the bond with one another strong. Definitely.
I think I think it's beautiful when people talk about being able to be home. When you do, Alex talked about being able to be home and feel you can talk unedited, and that your family is a place where you'll be completely accepted. I think it's so beautiful, and it wasn't the feeling that I had about family for a lot of my life, and I guess that's partially why because I'm different, than a lot of my family. So I guess that's why I sought out people, that I could be myself with, and be comfortable with, and who would accept me, for who I am, because I didn't find that so much in my family as I was exploring and trying to figure out who I was.
But what's interesting is there's a piece in there that I can identify, because I still was the creative. I still was the person that was more Afrocentric than everyone else in the family. So there was a lot of, clashing from 12 years on to 18. And then at 18, as I got out of American history and started going, looking at, the continent of Africa and those traditions, I started to say, okay, so my family may not have these views, and my views may seem extreme, but in the end, what is it that I value the most? And it is those times. So it's like I can choose to not engage in those conversations, because I was so adamant and like, you gotta know this and you have to,
Yeah.
wow. And
And
so,
that,
but once I pulled back from that, then it just started to be the fun. I still would sneak stuff in there though, but so I couldn't
yeah,
help it.
and I think I very much, that's what I was gonna, like, that's the second part of what I was gonna say, is that, but over time, somehow realizing that the love and being there for each other, that so I guess with my kids also, like, it's very important that they know that I'm there for them unconditionally, and that I will go through whatever needs to be gone through to support them, and to help them, and to, just and also celebrate with them, but especially just like, so that's where my son, is going to go to a Friendsgiving this weekend, and he texted me and said, I need to make a dessert. Can I come up to your house and make a dessert? Because he's never made a dessert before. So, like, those things are important. Like, just knowing that I can be his go-to. And then in some ways, when I bought this house, my sisters and my mom showed up, and they were like teaching me how to do house things, because I'm like, 60 years old, and I have never had I've never been a home equity for a home, repair person. So, it's those things are like, really, I think those are
Yeah. And they become more important, in the scope of family than differing political views or social views, etc. And so
exactly.
Jessica says communication, letting my family know how much I care about them, how much they are loved, how much they are valued. We don't know if we have tomorrow, so it's best always to try to get along as the best that we can, and always take the time to be with them. I think that is just so important. Again, it just makes me think about my mom. You know, this is all you have. And I think when, with my mom having cancer, it was still short, but it was over time. But, and I've shared this before in a webinar, but with my brother, he choked to death. And it was so jarring. And he was only 42, that something clicked in my mind, exactly what you're talking about, Jessica. Like, you know what? Anything can happen on any day. So I start to put things in the scope of, is this more important than if something happened to them tomorrow. Like, is this disagreement, am I going to hold on to this grudge? Will it be important if this person was no longer and with you? And all of the time, the answer is no. So, you know, and I think once, as far as the black sheep piece, quote unquote, right, Katthe, like once I start being so forceful with my views when I was younger and just kind of like chill with the family, then people started asking me questions. Well, what do you think about this? Or you said like this. So, you know, approach is everything.
Yeah, and Alex, you really lived that in terms of, you say that it was, how do I say this? Like in terms of your priorities, I just know you. And I know that like when your mom got sick, your plans totally changed.
Everything.
Everything changed, like in terms of, because, and that was your value, your priority, you know, and maybe that was influenced by what you're saying now, by the quickness of your brother, but you know.
Yeah, but also my mom just repeatedly like, family's all you have, and you don't stay mad, and you don't go to bed mad, and you know, she kind of like drilled that stuff. So it was not a question of rearranging my life to be there for her. So Sylvia says, in my family, we celebrate a few cultures and we try to get together every weekend to celebrate life. Love that. The opportunity of being together, healthy, and to talk about how much we value one another, value each other, what we value each one of them to be a part of our family.
That's so beautiful,
That
Sylvia.
is
I
super
love that.
beautiful.
Because I mean, like we called my dad's, you know, memorial service a celebration of life. But I think it's, I love that every weekend is a celebration of life. Every day is a celebration of life. You know, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let's be rejoice and be glad in it. It's so beautiful, Sylvia.
Definitely. Also, shameless plug. It really just comes to my mind. Please don't think I'm just trying to be a promote our new thing, but it made me think about the intent of questionable, and it made me think about some one. There's a question there about what is it that you like or value, and so what you said, Sylvia, like if people are doing that every weekend or every day, it has to strengthen the family, right? Because more gratitude breeds more gratitude breeds more gratitude. So that's beautiful.
And just time together. I mean, that's the other thing is like I said this is due to COVID. I know some people, you know, you were talking about people gathering before COVID and everything, but with my family, we live in different places and we didn't really get together, you know, as a group frequently. Like one of us would go visit my parents, except for like holidays or something, you know. But we started doing this weekly call with my mom and my sisters and me. And it's just that like hour, 45 minutes of sharing what's going on in our lives. Like it made a big difference in terms of the closeness. And that's not, you know, because that was just realizing that, you know, my mom was taking care of my dad and nobody could visit for a while and it was COVID and, you know, just so she wouldn't be lonely, you know, and, but just ordinary interaction, just picking up the phone, just like calling on the way home from when you're driving, like that kind of ordinary interaction is really, really important, I think, you know, in terms of just the fabric of family, like weaving the fabric of family. And that's also what I liked about what Sylvia said is that it's like it's every day. It's not just, you know, for particular celebrations.
Exactly.
And what Jessica was talking about, like the communication and, you know, we don't necessarily have tomorrow, you know.
Definitely. Um, let's see. Well, next question, Andrew. How extended is your family?
Yeah, we were talking about that, right, Alex? Like earlier, like about, you know, extending it to to family and friends and sisters and people beyond.
And I think and it's interesting because my friends who I consider family, their children are my family. So one of my close friends, you know, her son calls me auntie. and doesn't think twice about it. And then, of course, when he says it, people are like, are y'all really sisters? We're like, yeah. They were like, and then, of course, they're trying to like do the physical comparisons. And we just keep going like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Yes, we are. Anna says to friends and coworkers that her family has extended to friends and coworkers. I think, godparents are very, very important, very much. It's interesting because one particular godmother of my daughters is also like now become my godmother. I've had mentors that I consider, family. One in particular is my mentor, Miss Lynetta. She's like another mom, and she's like, daughter this, daughter that. But it started off strictly, like to your point, Anna, as a professional kind of coaching thing that just turned into a relationship outside of that.
Well, and us, Alex.
Yeah, exactly. Because we were like friends before I came here.
Yeah.
And meaning as full time. I was on the board before, but yeah, so I have a lot of professional friendships. And then it's happened in reverse. Like with Chad, I have friends who were family from 20 who then we had a professional relationship. Which I think we've done a good job navigating. So Jennifer says, I have some friends I consider family, and I often with a large, but often with
Fish, I think.
yep, for a larger family. Wish for
Yeah.
a larger family. Thank you. I really appreciate and sometimes envy cultures that have more large family gatherings than mine. Interesting. Yeah, yeah. I feel that because my husband's family is huge. And we really just had our nuclear family, and then the rest of my family was either down the country or in Chicago. And we would just see them like twice a year. Um, but yeah, those huge families. If I had to do it over, if I'd have met, my husband younger, I'm sure I probably have about 10 children right now, easily. I always wanted a super large family too, Jennifer, at least 5. Angie said, it's extended a lot since I've got married. I love to see how connected my wife's family is and how integral the grandparents are with raising the youngest generation. Yes. Family can be anyone, Jessica said. And it's kind of like that elder piece you were talking about, Katthe, like that. I mean, we think about it programmatically, right? Two gen approach, generational, intergenerational programs, etc. But families, I see the importance of having the grandparent in the grandchild's life, and it's reciprocated. It's not just the grandparent to the child, but the children do something for the grandparents, and there's zest for life that is like very beautiful to watch.
I saw that. I see that, and I really appreciate that in my sister, the way she does family, because I think even within my family, there's a big variation in how each of us do family, each of the siblings, how we do family. And my sister had her oldest and his girlfriend lived with her. And then they got pregnant, and then they had a baby, and then they got married a couple of years later, but they lived with her for like Emmy, the baby, lived in the extended family household for like her first 5 years, which was amazing for her. Like that child feels so loved because at every point, she had 2 aunts, a father, a mother, and a grandmother in the same house with her. So there was always some loving arms to go to, it wasn't like one young, stressed out parent having to deal, and that was not how we grew up. My mother's mother was like, your children are your responsibility. Don't expect me to babysit, that was more the ethic. Like, but Lisa, my sister, she did what she thought was the right thing to do. And she has a very close family, and it's really good for the children. But, it's like, she's very close to her grandchildren now, all of them. So
yeah, definitely.
and
My
I've seen
mom.
that with other friends that I have that have their children move in and a grandchild born, in the household. Those children get a lot, and the grandparents get a lot, but the children get a lot.
Yeah, Like definitely lots and lots of love. Lacey said, as a military family, our extended family includes families that we grew close to while stationed together. They were always there for everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can imagine that.
Um, as you go, you can go ahead and go to the next question. How does your feeling about yourself connect to your relationship with your family? How does your feeling about yourself connect to your relationship with your family? That's a deep question.
I spoke a little bit about that, like with my feeling that the more I can accept my family, the more I can accept about myself. The more
Mm-hmm.
I love my family despite all of, everything, the more I can love myself. And that I don't feel great. But when I'm with family, like friends, family, or coworker family, or people I'm close to, when when there's conflict that's not resolving, or that is under the surface, or that is, when there's that, it does make me feel badly, about myself, so.
Yeah, and I think, family, what I've learned about my feelings, the more I have learned to love myself unconditionally, but still try to improve on myself, the more I practice loving other people unconditionally. And it's actually a great spiritual lesson in that, being able to love someone without condition. But that does not mean that, you just tolerate anything. I think sometimes we confuse, well, you have to love family because it's unconditional, or as my mom was like, the biblical, because her own twist, you speak the truth in love, which sets a different tone, but it doesn't mean you don't speak your truth or the truth about situations. So I think learning to love, and still, right, a work in progress, right, for us all, but learning to love ourselves unconditionally then feeds out and changes the relationship dynamic, with your family. Um, and like I say, there's still a work in it's still a work in progress, because there I have a few family members where I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is rough, because what I feel has happened is so grave. But you have to like still try to work through that. Um, and I always think about, as far as my feeling about myself, it's like putting myself in the other person's shoes. What if I had to walk in this person's shoes, then understanding that whatever the situation is, if I'm gonna, that is really not right. Like going back to our Be Strong Family is one of our core texts. The four agreements is not personal, and I say that, and with the caveat that it's easier said than done, but it's like everything. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. So, anyone else?
Well, I think family is part of identity. Like when you think of, if somebody asks you, who are you? Like your role in your family. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. Like that. Those relationships are part of my identity. And doing a good job with them, or not doing a good job with them. Like, it's interesting, Alex, because like I talk about I'm noticing I'm talking about the negative side of it, and then you bring in the positive. Like, it's beautiful. Like I talk, what?
I said that's how we balance it all out.
Yeah. But that whole thing is also, I think, like, you know, I am because you are. There's also just that my feeling about myself is connected, who I am is connected to my family.
And Andrew said, I've accepted that I've changed a lot about myself since I grew up with my family, and how I perceive those changes are going to be a lot different than how my family views it. At the same time, I think those changes have fundamentally improved how I relate with my family. I see our conversations and relationships constantly evolving. I really love that point, Andrew, because, oh, wait a minute. For example, In the past, I never really had a
I wanted
serious.
an example. I wanted an example. I'm so glad you gave one. I was like, huh?
I know, right? For example, in the past, I never really had a serious, deep conversation with my dad, in part because he has ideas about emotions and being a man. This year, I suffered a personal tragedy, and when he called me up to talk about it, it was the first time he opened up in a meaningful way. I see that as the beginning of a different relationship with him, and I'm hopeful about the future. That is so beautiful. And what you made me think about is you know, our greatest lessons come from our family, right? Like our greatest lessons about ourselves and how we react to people, etc., can, happen in our families. And you can apply those to friendships, work relationships, all of that. And then I think, from a spiritual level, I'll just speak from my own spiritual perspective. And Katthe, we were talking about this a little bit earlier in our check-in, but like, my personal philosophy is that we are souls in this physical body, or the bodysuit, as I like to tell myself, to remind myself that. And so that there are lessons that we're all here to teach each other. And oftentimes our greatest lessons, our greatest souls lessons play out within the context of family. And I've seen that happen a lot, for me, even with, our extended family. Thanks for sharing, everyone. Thanks for sharing that, Andrew.
Thing about, the idea that we're separate, I mean, it's like if you zoom out, this is a science. I was thinking about fractals, and I was thinking about the science of it and how everything is connected to everything else. And we have this really persistent illusion of us being separate individuals bounded by our bodies. But in reality, we aren't really separate at all. And our bodies are one kind of boundary, but we have, I'm sure in the future, when you say science will catch up with spirituality, it already is, like in terms of how my thoughts impact your thoughts, how we are all part of this big ecosystem. So when I say my family is in me and I'm in my family, it's not just a metaphor, it's actually really true. It's like, if something happens to someone that you love or care about that's far away, you often know it, and you don't even know that you know it until they call and they say, that's what was going on. I mean, I have that feeling too. I don't know if other people have that feeling, but you have that feeling like this isn't me. I'm not upset. Everything is good with me, but something's going on with somebody I know, because I feel it. And then they call and they tell me that it was that person. They call and they say what they're. Does that ever happen to you, Alex, or anything like that?
All the time. Definitely all the time. Like I'll just be sad. And I'm like, I take an inventory, like, why am I sad? I don't really have a reason to be sad. Today was a good day. And then inevitably it'll come up. And where I've witnessed it the most is in my twins. They're identical twins. Like just the way they know that something is wrong with the other one, especially when they're separated. It's so interesting. Or like, I think this is like from like comic book stuff, but like this is the wrong way to say it. I don't even know. I feel like it's a Marvel thing, but like the concept of the hive mind type of situation, I see that with the girls when they literally speak the same thing, or they can be separate. I will go and say, "Hey, what about this?" Then go upstairs and ask the other one, and they say the exact same thing, right? And so that's really have shown like how connected we are. And yes, twins or whatever, but in general, they know when something's wrong with me. I know when I can tell even with my coworkers by their tone of voice, like, what's wrong? And I'm like, how do you know? Because they're putting on their best professional face, but it's energy. Going back to the fractals, right? It's all energy. And it's about how in tune you are to that energy.
Yep. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it.
Me too. And then I see there's fractals coming up tomorrow.
No, that's a different one. That's a different.
Oh, that's the one that I have to go back and look at that. I missed that one.
Andrew's putting in. He put in Denise's and
that's from last year.
A bunch of guest presenters that were awesome. And now we're moving the webinars more towards conversation and more towards just not having the experts as much. We'll have some experts in and out, but just talking, that there's a value to getting together and just talking. So thank you, Alex, for anchoring this. And
thank you. And thank you, Andrew. You're so quick on the draw with the webinar post. He's like, that was great. Thank you. Andrew said he very much enjoyed the conversation today. We hope you all did. We appreciated your comments.
Let's go to the next slide real quick. So what do we want to amplify coming out of this conversation? Emily, anything else you want to amplify? Put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm going to add mine. Hashtag amplify oneness. Andrew said, hashtag amplify ancestors. Love that.
I'm just going to amplify love. That goes for a lot of webinars. But anybody else put in the chat, Jennifer says amplify belonging.
Love that.
What else do we want to amplify? Amplify oneness. Keep putting them in the chat and we'll go to the next slide. Our webinars, we have Tuesday and Thursday is Spanish, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we have English. Fridays are our Taste of Cafes. And then on Monday, Karina Henschel, who's a Be Strong Family staff person, and I will be here talking about having fun with family during the holidays. What's your plan? Swapping ideas and traditions with each other. And then on Wednesday, Alexandra and Robin are going to be back getting us into the mind space of Thanksgiving. What are you thankful for? Questionable. We've been talking about this in the margins of this whole conversation. We have a new game that Be Strong Families has developed exactly to be able to bring families together, to have fun with each other, to learn about each other, to share stories with each other. But it also is competitive, and it does end the game. So you can win. So we encourage you to check it out. And it's available on the Questionable the Game website or the Be Strong Families website. And subscribe to us on YouTube.
Yes, and share and help us get up our subscription and our likes on our YouTube. And I saw some.
We have these webinars have gotten kind of small. I mean, we used to have more people joining. We're continuing to do them with a little bit less frequency. We're hoping people are also checking them out on YouTube. But if you like it, share it with people you know. And tell us what you'd like. I mean, you always can drop me a line or Andrew or Alex and just tell us what topics you'd like to see on the webinar and what your ideas are for getting more people involved. We'd love
Yes, definitely. We would love to hear that.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We hope that you have a beautiful day, and thanks for being here with us.